Hey Dave, what was the thing you wanted most for Christmas, and was it likely to cause your grisly death?
So when I was a kid, I wanted the AT-AT, the Star Wars thing, that walked. I wanted it really, really badly, and I did get it. Probably wouldn't cause my death, although I think I certainly wouldn't have fared as well as Luke did in Hoth.
Well, now you're just being humble, I think. I mean, clearly you're still here, so it did not kill you, which is great.
Well, I mean, it depends on who you ask. I think it's good, but
I feel like Christmases in your household were hard. Christmas. For some, it's a joyous occasion. For others, it's just another schizophrenic flashback through personal and tormented hell. In POOKA, we follow Wilson, a struggling actor all alone in LA, just trying to figure out what direction his life is taking. Out of the blue, a potential dream role falls in his lap, playing the titular POOKA, the furry mascot of a hot new must-have toy for the holiday season. POOKA is a Furby-ish freak show of a character who has a unique program. He can interact with people by choosing his own mood, to either be naughty or nice. And as Wilson gets deeper into the character, both literally and figuratively, the choice to be naughty or nice gets increasingly harder and more confusing for him to choose as well. Dave, what did you think?
I don't even know where to start with this thing, man. I don't know. I can't. I don't know if I'm just slow or if this thing didn't make a whole lot of sense.
I mean, I think we had training on like confusing temporal timelines with tag, so I feel like you've been through the bushes on this already. You've had to deal with some of this.
Right, and I mean, the jury is out as to how well I fared with that. Honest to God, I don't know. I don't. I think I hate this,
Oh
but
wow, you hate
it
this?
could be it could be that I just don't get it. Um, at any point, if you want to jump into spoilers and just tell me what happened, like what I watch.
And I'd like to note that Dave and I literally just watched this. We watched this. We finished it maybe 20 minutes before this recording. So we're still piecing it together in our heads. And yes, of course, there will be massive spoilers. But there are always going to be spoilers because we're just not any good about not having any. And you know what? If you don't have a problem with that, screw you. Watch somebody else. I said it. That's all there is.
They already are.
They already are. Nobody. It's not going to matter. Not going to matter. Yeah, what happened? That's a really good question. Uh, I think we can say that there's some basic stuff we probably can agree on. We can probably say that there really is a guy named Wilson, right? There is a character there.
I
And we
think
can say
so.
that he is a character that had a traumatic incident in his past, I think, and that he is struggling to deal with the trauma in a unique way. And it combines with the idea of this other character that he adopts, Puka, and it combines with the season in a way that I guess makes this technically a Christmas horror movie. But other than that, it's kind of, I think there's a lot of things that are up for grabs that we could sort of theorize if we wanted to. I mean, let's go back to your initial reaction just quickly. What was it that you think made you hate it? I mean, just
All right, so
not
I
like
mean,
the specifics, but like what's your initial? Why was your initial reaction to be just completely turned off by it?
well, so there's and again, it could be that I just don't understand it and I need to watch it again. Um, there seemed to be some sort of symbiotic or some kind of relationship between the suit of the Puka toy that he was wearing and him. There, some kind of, I don't know if it was a parasitic kind of thing or a symbiotic thing, because they try and weave this kind of Dickens thing into it,
Ah, so you caught
and
that? Yeah.
yeah, but I don't doesn't work. Like it didn't seem to work to me. Like,
Well, I think the first thing with that whole idea is to figure out whether or not like where the line is in terms of Puka's actual existence. You know,
hmm,
because it's possible that Puka as a character and as the whole narrative could just be entirely within his own head, right? It could be a character that he created that he's living in some way. On the other hand, there is the closing shot with the massive accident that he suffers, where there is a Puka doll that was ostensibly carried by his child. So Puka could also be or an already existing character, and he is having some sort of crazy, you know, sort of like traumatic incident where he's putting himself in the character of Puka. Or, it could be exactly kind of what we saw. It could be like the fact that there is just a Puka suit, and he was really trying to do something for this. Like he was really trying to be a brand mascot, and his own trauma got mixed in with that and made him sort of crazy. Like, I see what you're saying. It could be a symbiotic relationship. There could have been a spirit within Puka itself, or it could have been sort of like a Fight Club scenario where we are constantly seeing the Tyler Durden to the other guy whose name I'm blanking on, situation happening where, it's not really clear who's really one driving the train in that scenario and whether or not the two people are just kind of experiencing different timelines even though they're the same character. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I honestly, I think we're struggling with this because ultimately it doesn't come together until the very end, and we just saw the very end. So let's talk about some specific aspects of the whole work in general. What did you think of the performances? What did you think of? It was Naisha Attendi who played Wilson.
I didn't. I not great.
You didn't like him?
No. Although, again, I may need to watch it again because he might have been. It might have been that I was just. I thought there were times when he was just kind of weirdly overacting, but it could have just been that he was trying to portray someone that was just mentally ill from jump.
Was he overacting when he was being really emotive, or was he overacting when he was trying to keep it all within?
I think he was overacting when he was not.
That's interesting.
Freaking out. When he was actually freaking out or yelling or screaming, that was actually very good. I thought he handled that stuff very well. But looking back on it though, I was kind of looking at the movie from the beginning as a person that was sort of slowly losing their sanity. And maybe that was wrong. Maybe it was a guy who was just off his rocker from jump.
I think that's a really good question. I think it can go. I mean, I think that's still up for grabs in terms of us dissecting it. To me, I certainly went through thinking like, yeah, it was a guy who was just losing his sanity at times, to also thinking like, oh, maybe he's a ghost looking back on something that happened, or maybe he's like, actually dead and trying to piece together a flashback in a way. I mean, there's lots of different things that kind of happen. That makes his own performance a little more complicated, just because, I think that he has to really nuance the way that he handles being soft and being sort of confused about everything. And it's interesting that I think your takeaway from that was that it seemed like he was trying hard to do that. I guess too hard to do that. I didn't necessarily feel that way, but I also felt like, I was so busy trying to figure out what was going on with him anyway that maybe I was distracted, so it didn't matter as much. Initially, you certainly don't have any sense that he might be an antagonistic character or he might have some sort of problem, and I kind of like the way it slowly rolled out the idea of him being more of a troubled character than maybe, it seemed like to begin with. How did you feel about John Daly's performance, who plays Finn, the corporate shill guy?
I guess it was fine. I didn't.
See, I really liked his performance myself.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, he also as a comedian, I like John Daly, so it's kind of like maybe I'm a little biased going into it. I like the way that he was very snappy and kind of on point. And I get, for me, it's like his performance calls back a question that we just sort of talked about, which is where does the line of reality exist? Like, was he a real person? Yeah. Was he a real character?
It's odd because he does go in and inexplicably bring the card. It's part of the movie that I didn't quite understand is how he comes to go get the card from I'm blanking on her name.
That's Melanie.
Yeah, so he goes.
Played by Latasha Rose. Yeah.
Who I thought was the star of the film, the movie. It seemed like out of nowhere. It didn't seem there was any unless he just noticed that Wilson had taken an interest in her. Maybe he doesn't exist. Maybe you nailed it. Maybe he's not a real character.
It kind of depends on how you want to view the narrative in general. I mean, he shows up at the very end as this other character, or at least as this, I guess, seemingly the real person. So it's a question of whether or not, he has been put into this place in Wilson's
Right.
mind, or whether or not there's a mixture of things that are happening, whether or not that's a character that was overridden by this recognizable figure from his trauma. It's hard to say right now, but I mean, I think either way, I guess for me was that he was a nice kind of counterpoint to some of the other subtlety and nuance of what was happening. I mean, I think that it was kind of fun to watch him go through the motions of what he was doing. Dale Dickey plays his neighbor, and it's funny because she's not credited on IMDb with a character name, but she's in the she's in the credits. But I mean, she's an interesting character actress that's been around for a while, actor that's been around for a while, and I thought that she did some interesting stuff with this role. I think there was a lot of her walking a fine line of what actually is the reality of this character and whether or not she even exists. How did you feel about the way that she kind of interacted with everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think she the sort of a mysticism to the character that I think she pulled that off very well. Right from the beginning, she behaves a little odd, and he even comments on it, which I thought, I don't know, that kind of bothered me. Like, oh, people don't usually let strangers in. I don't know. It's a little on the nose. Just let me think that. Don't say it. Anyway,
Did you feel like at the beginning? Did you feel like she might have been some sort of like dangerous force, for instance, or something like more evil, perhaps? Than
yeah, I think so, but I think that's a total red herring. I think that they're trying to get you to think that she's going to be some kind of danger to him, and then ultimately it's the other way around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about unconventional narratives in general. I mean, I think that we can say that this movie really played around with the idea of temporality and timelines. It really cut. The editing was really cut in a way that made it intentionally unclear, as to what was happening when, and also what was actually happening to the character. I think that the issue with doing that in film is that you don't really fully enjoy it until you kind of think back on it and then put some pieces together. And sometimes the pieces fit better than other times. I mean, I know that we just came out of it, but I mean, are there things that you're thinking of now that you feel like we're definitely not answered or not necessarily dealt with?
Well, I mean, I definitely thought that the end. Well, I don't know. I mean, I thought that the end. They tried to do the Dickens scene where he's standing there watching this horrible episode unfold, and I assume his future. But or maybe it was the past. I think that's the only. Maybe I think maybe that had happened at some other point in the film. There was, but I don't remember him ever being outside his body and watching it unfold. Any other time,
Well,
was there?
it kind of depends. I mean, I feel like because there were all these times when Puka, the character, was animated, and it seemed like it was a separate character from him, even though he is ostensibly Puka. In a way, he was perhaps watching other episodes of himself be active around him. It kind of depends on whether or not you thought that the Puka character itself was animated by him in his different mood states, or if you thought it was like something else, if it was another animus, if it was another intelligence behind it.
Well, there's the scene where the kid has a birthday party, and he Puka does something horrible to another child that we don't exactly get to find out what. I I, I don't know. I guess he all right. Are we supposed to believe that he was wearing? I assume we're supposed to believe that he was actually the Puka, and he just didn't tell anyone that it was him.
Yeah, although again, that kind of depends on whether or not you think what happened in general actually happened, or if it was just sort of a made-up sort of scene in his head to begin with, that he was trying to deal with the trauma of him losing his family ultimately, right? Like, it kind of depends on whether or not you think everything that happened in the film was in the space of him waking up from a very serious accident and sort of meshing together the pieces of his life from the present into this sort of like dreamscape of something else, an alternate reality, or if all that stuff actually did happen and it led up to what we see as the future with him in this relationship and the traumatic incident that happens from that.
All right, so I mean, my best guess, and I can't. I mean, I could be completely off base here, is that all of that stuff in the movie that we watched happened uh, before he moved into that apartment.
So you feel like that stuff all definitely happened, one way or the other?
I think so, and I think that's why, he went and he met that woman. She survived the crash. Her daughter died.
I don't think that was their daughter, by the way.
The other woman in the.
I got the impression they were a couple.
Oh, maybe. I think she was younger. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. This is all. It's all stipulation.
Sure. So I think that all happened before. I think that. Oh man, I could be like this. Could be stupid. I could be make.
I think that the point of this really is to kind of like open up the idea of what it could be. I think it's okay to have crazy theories about all of this because it's not like the movie itself was telegraphing the answers, right? I think that the movie is leaving it up to the viewer to really kind of decide what the timeline might be, what the actual circumstances might be. I think the most telling thing that we have to work against in terms of what the movie might be trying to tell us was probably the last shot, and let's talk about that a little bit. The last shot is after a horrific car accident where Wilson is lying on the ground and he sees his family dying, basically, and he sees all the other characters around him that we've come to see. He also sees a version of himself standing in the POOKA costume and also a full POOKA. So you end up having at least sort of like three different states of Wilson. You have Wilson as he is, you have the half Wilson, the half POOKA, and then you have the full POOKA. And I think it's I think it's relevant to bring up Dickens and Scrooge, because I think that in some ways there is a lot of Ghost of Christmas Past, Ghost of Christmas Present, Ghost of Christmas Future stuff going on. Especially in the beginning, I don't know if you noticed, but like his audition before he even got to POOKA was for Scrooge. He was auditioning for A Christmas Carol. It feels like they were definitely trying to pull on that illusion and trying to suggest different states of these characters guiding him, perhaps, or trying to teach him a lesson. In hindsight, I'm not sure. Are the people that he sees at the end, the versions of himself that he sees at the end, actually real, or are they figurative, imaginative states, and it's some sort of hallucination, or are all three things existing at one time and it's a crazy ghost story? I'm not really sure. It's kind of up for grabs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think I don't know. I don't know why in Tag I was okay and I could hang with it, and you know what it was is that I had theories and I had themes and I don't know. This I'm just so lost that I just don't. I don't know. I don't know.
I think we're watching a character split himself apart, and the character of POOKA itself, it was about duality. It was about being good or bad. And we're watching this character look back on his life and sort of say, here are the parts that were bad, that were my fault. Here are the parts where I was good. And maybe the trauma of doing that forces him into these two sort of coexisting dualistic states. So that in the narrative within the movie, there's always two Wilsons, and there's always either a good Wilson or a bad Wilson. Usually, the bad Wilson is in the POOKA costume, and maybe the POOKA itself came to represent the bad Wilson one way or the other, or maybe it's not about any of that, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. I mean, yeah, I don't fault the movie for being confusing. That's not true. I fault the movie a little bit for being confusing. It certainly didn't have to be this hard. It could have been a little bit more telegraphed. You know how I feel about confusing movies, Dave. You know that I like them.
I do, and I don't hate them as a rule. Yeah, I don't. The more I think about it, I'm getting more upset. Like I don't.
Oh no, this is just making you angry.
Yeah, I really don't. I don't care enough. I mean, I was more invested, I think, in Tag.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because you're seeing this guy sort of abuse a kid, and it just kind of.
Mm-hmm. You felt like there was really a need for a redemption story in this situation.
Right. Well, you're not invested in that at all. Like, you
Yeah.
don't. If you look at it as all the horrible things are in the past, before he moved to that apartment, he's maybe come to grips with the fact that he's trying to be a better person and not, as he said, not hurt people anymore. But it looks like he killed the kid and the mom. So you're like,
Well, you mean because of the car accident, or do you mean from?
well, I mean, basically, he was rage driving. He didn't intentionally murder them.
Right, but I mean, it was his fault for whatever happened. Yeah.
Right. He was, doing the sort of abusive, gonna drive out of control. It's, kind of a classic abusive thing to do, is to make the people uncomfortable in the car by driving
Yeah.
aggressively, and he's got to be like staring at him in the mirror. So
Yeah.
that's what causes the accident. It's through his sort of awful behavior that they end up dying. It's his his blow up that causes the accident that he knocks the tree over, and they have to go. Well, the trip is to go replace the tree that he broke.
Sure. I mean, he's the instigator of all the terrible things that happen in this, and I mean, I feel like that's why whenever Puka is doing crazy things in the movie itself, or when you think that Puka is violently assaulting either his neighbor or like kids around him, it's because it is him sort of divorcing himself from what actually happened in his past, because it's too much for him to admit to and to feel guilt for. I mean, the whole thing with his neighbor, he has this crazy sort of violent vision numerous times of Puka, the character, coming and killing her, right?
Right.
And it's funny because then the narrative is that it goes down this path of her being a person that kills herself. But of course,
Yes.
all of that is bumkiss, because we find out later that no, he actually was the result of her death from a car accident.
Well, I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't think she.
I think she died.
I don't think she died, but maybe she did die. I think she survived the car accident. And I think that he moves into the new apartment. She's there, and maybe that's what triggers.
You don't think that? So you feel like she just doesn't remember him?
Right. She wasn't totally. She was like half comatose, and then she, goes out of consciousness pretty quickly thereafter. He goes through the windshield, is laying on the asphalt.
How does Puka enter the timeline in that scenario, though? Because Puka already existed, because we know Puka existed from the car.
Yeah. Right. I don't know. Well, maybe it was Puka already existed. Gosh.
Rosebud. Well, I think it comes down to what you believe. If you think that it was a past, present, future situation, or if you think it was all in his mind to begin with, and all that stuff was just put together with him trying to reconcile guilt. I guess if I was going to be angry at this movie, I would be like, that's the thing I'm angry about. I'm angry that the movie took me on that ride for an hour and a half when none of that actually potentially happened, right? I mean, like, the whole thing, all these people that he put together in this narrative are people from this last few minutes of his life, possibly. And maybe this whole thing is just completely made up for him to realize about being a terrible person.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm just totally wrong. Maybe
I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. This is probably the most confusing Christmas movie I've ever seen.
It's one of the most confusing movies I've ever seen, period.
So I guess the question is, was it confusing because you feel like the editing was off, or was it confusing because you think the writing, the narrative structure in general was off? Like, do you fault the creators for the confusion, or do you feel like it was just a complex story to begin with and it's hard to grasp?
Well, I'm not confident enough to blame them.
Yeah, you can blame them.
Well,
it's okay.
I'm willing to say that it's entirely possible that I just blew it, that I just missed it, and and that smarter people can put it together and get it. Maybe that's what's annoying me. Maybe I don't like being shown my limitations.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it certainly doesn't have a good rating right now on IMDb, and I have to assume that probably there are a lot of people that are also reacting in a similar vein, where they're like, I don't really understand what this is, and that makes me upset about it, which I totally understand. I understand, I've had this conversation plenty of times with people where I think the question is always like, is it ambiguous because of intention, because the creators or wanted it to be ambiguous and they did that the right way? Or is it ambiguous because of laziness, because the creators didn't actually answer questions that they should have, or maybe didn't write, the narrative the way that it would have been better for people to understand? It's hard to say. I mean, I also am left questioning this movie, so it's I think it's okay to have an opinion both ways about it.
I don't think it's laziness. I think it's a movie that I think they understand it. I think they know what they want. They have it. They understand it. They know what they wanted to say, and they feel like they said it, and they made it difficult for people to piece together. I think they believe that all the pieces are there, and that you just need to suss it out.
So you're saying they're dicks?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that there's
What kind of dicks write a Christmas movie that makes it hard to understand? I mean, like, it's Christmas. It's not supposed to be hard to understand.
Well, I mean, they're trying to do something that hasn't been done before.
Oh my god, those dicks! What dicks? I'm going to throw out another question that also muddies the water. Was this a horror movie or was it a comedy?
I think it's a horror movie.
Did you feel that the horror was actually, I guess, horrific? Or did it just feel quirky and weird?
Well, I mean, it's as much a horror movie as a Christmas Story is. I mean, it's just by the.
You mean Christmas? Wait, Christmas Carol or Christmas Story?
Christmas Carol, sorry.
Okay, because Christmas Story is a comedy, kind of.
That is straight up comedy. Thank you. Christmas Carol, I mean, there's ghosts, but I mean, it's, and I think that the last sequence can be kind of scary, depending on how it's done.
I mean, I gotta be honest, there were parts of it where POOKA was in a threatening mood that I just thought were funny and cute. I mean, there were parts of this movie that felt very much like a Funny or Die sketch, like the sketch
Sure.
where like it was like they were going to make a parody of a monster movie using a Christmas toy, as opposed to making an actual monster movie using a Christmas toy. It felt like it was slightly self-aware about how odd the situation was. And that sort of removed me from the idea of it being horror-ish. I think that, like we talk about there being a horrific ending to this, that does sort of make up for that. But at the same time, during the movie itself, I kept kind of being taken out of the moment because of this. Because I thought the character design itself was a little bit too cute, I guess, in a way. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but...
Because, I mean, I just am looking over your shoulder, and there's the art clown.
Oh.
And, that's Clown. He's supposed to be a silly thing, and he kind of, you can do the comedic character in a very scary way.
Yeah.
And it didn't stay cute long enough for you to get that shock value of it turning bad.
Yeah. I guess the question is, I mean, like all the parts that were supposed to be very obviously scary with a monster, all these sort of incarnations of POOKA as a scary creature, did you actually find them scary, or did you find them almost kind of funny because the character design itself isn't necessarily translatable into a horror monster scenario? There were a lot of really like crazy sequences at points in this movie that were full of what would typically be considered horrific imagery, but they were sort of counterpointed by like this giant, fuzzy, big-eyed creature in the middle of them. Maybe it's horrific in a sense, but at the same time, it's not necessarily typically horrific. It's not like grotesque in a way.
Well, that can be, I think, a horror trope too. The thing that is not supposed to be at all dangerous. It's the cute, cuddly thing.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Child's Play.
Sure, Child's Play definitely is a part of this. But with Child's Play with Chucky, he's friendly looking, and then he becomes very scary because of the way that his sort of features mold and the way that he actually physically attacks people. Whereas it feels like POOKA was really more like a giant stuffed bear most of the time that occasionally had bad moods. I guess I wonder if you felt threatened by POOKA ever, or if you felt like it was more of a device to move along the plot.
Well, early on, I thought for sure that the POOKA costume was some kind of either demonic thing or I don't.
Very specific look.
I think that's a red herring. I don't think that it is. I think it's just like a manifestation of an alter ego.
Just going back to that for a second, what did you think of the character design? It's cute in a way, but it's not trying to look like an existing cute product. Like it's a very specific look it doesn't look like an actual toy or a character that you would
I
find.
think there's probably some symbolism with the glowing eyes that I'm just missing.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's symbolism. I think there's certainly like a creepiness to the way they set it up. But I mean, like, you know, the mouth being transfixed in this constant like it's not
Yeah.
not like friendly. You would not actually ever see that happen as a real toy. It's nothing. You know, to me, it's interesting. The thing that I thought about the most, I don't know if you're familiar with this stuff at all, are Hopi Kachina dolls. There are some totems from like a Hopi culture that actually have very similar faces, where it's really big eyes and like a round mouth like that. So I was waiting to see if there was going to be some sort of tie-in to some sort of something like an indigenous spirit or something else. I don't know. They were trying to evoke a monster on a very primal level in a way, but they weren't trying to make it necessarily typically horrific, where you would have like big scary teeth and really like pointed, you know, angry eyes and that kind of stuff, where you could see it being more typically monsterish. So, I mean, that's why I wondered, did you feel like it was an effective monster?
Oh, yeah, good question. I think it no, not really. I mean, I
How about another concrete detail we can actually talk about? Dave, you always talk about colors in movies. This movie was very, very color-coded. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to watch this again, but I feel like if I went back, maybe there's some way to piece the colors with where they are in the timeline.
Ah, that's interesting.
Unless maybe you picked up on it and I just missed it.
Well,
thematically, I didn't notice, and you're probably going to point something out, and I'm going to be like, oh yeah, but I didn't notice anything.
Well, you know, from a production point of view, and I assume that this was at least driven because it's a Christmas movie, they used red and green a lot to sort of telegraph different sort of environments and different places. So his apartment, for instance, was entirely green, and he was actually dressed in pretty greeny colors for the most part. His neighbor's apartment was entirely red, and she was dressed in very warm colors. And, you know, it's the kind of thing where, like, at first I was like, oh, okay, it's Christmassy. And then they carried it through. For instance, when he went to go audition, every other person in the hallway was dressed in red. He was dressed in green. When he went into the audition room, the woman who was the actual casting director was dressed in red. He was in green, and so was the rest of the room. So there were all these sort of like points where everything was sort of split into these two contrasting colors, which again, I think, you know, I don't know how much of that was about Christmas versus how much of it was about getting to the idea of duality again, because red and green are contrasting colors. So there's that. There's also the red and blue states, which are POOKA's sort of signature moves for being either naughty or nice, right? So POOKA is nice when he's blue, red-eyed when he's mean, and then it turns out that it also kind of translates to police lights and police sirens and stuff like that. I don't know if that was connected to the trauma from that point of view, or if it's just another way to talk about two different states and duality. But throughout the entire movie, the palette in general is either red, green, or brown, like POOKA, which is pretty interesting. I mean, I thought it was a pretty smart, interesting production design thing to do. The house that he looks at occasionally, which later turns out to be his actual house, well, from the outside, it's constantly shot as being sort of green, but they had a bunch of poinsettias in the front of it, so that was a little pop of red. All these little parts of the movie kind of came together in that way that were kind of interesting. I mean, like, it was definitely very, very color-coded in terms of outfits and in terms of things that were happening around the sky, you know? Like, anytime there were Christmas lights, they were generally either red or white or green. I mean, it was very straightforward. It wasn't very, like, it wasn't a rainbow-colored Christmas. It was very relatively monochromatic, so.
Wow. Yeah, okay. I don't know, maybe I was just off my game today. I got confused early, and maybe I was just sort of in this frenzied, I'm trying to figure this out, and I'm not getting anywhere.
There's a lot to take in. I mean, I guess, you know, for me, it's like, at a certain point, I stopped paying as much attention, and I just sort of was like looking at the production design. I was like, oh yeah, red, green, Christmas.
Well, I mean, I think that's the way to watch this. I think that maybe like if you just kind of look at it as a sort of stylistic, maybe you can pull something out of it and just enjoy it.
Well, so did you like the style of it? How did you feel about the way it was executed in general?
I didn't like it,
You didn't like it?
but I didn't. But as we've seen, maybe I wasn't paying as close attention to it as I should have because I was just so wrapped up in trying to figure out the narrative, which I never got anywhere with.
Well, okay. If you were going to summarize all the bad things, can you just summarize quickly what you thought with the bad parts?
I just think that my complete inability to even, I guess I put together some theories finally, but I just felt like I spent this whole movie. It's odd how some movies like Enemy is a movie where I was confused, but just zeroed in on it and just enjoying it, putting it together.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas POOKA, I was just irritated, and it's maybe it goes back to that style stuff. Maybe the fact that I didn't respond to that on that level, it just left me frustrated with the narrative, and so yeah, I guess it's just the narrative and the style. I don't like it. I don't like anything about this.
That's fair. I mean, for me, it was. I definitely felt like the tone was, like I was saying earlier. I had a hard time figuring out what exactly the tone was trying to be, and who the audience for this movie is. Because at times it felt like it could be all family, and then at times it was like definitely not for all family. So, I mean, I think that they kind of struggle with that. I think it could have been clearer. I appreciate what they were trying to do, and I appreciate the sort of like experimental timeline stuff. But I think that maybe there could have been a little bit more clarity for that. So, do you have any good things you want to say about it, or no?
I thought that the performance by the mother was.
That's Latasha Rose. Yeah,
I thought she was great.
Yeah,
I thought she was great. And thus ends the list of things that I like about this.
Okay, fair enough. I think for all the confusion, I still did enjoy the way that it kind of messed with timelines and understanding. So, and I did appreciate some of the production design stuff that we're talking about here, and I liked Hatendi's performance of Wilson.
Cool.
I mean, I see what you're saying. I guess it didn't strike me so much, but I'm not as good a judge of performances as you are anyway, honestly.
I think that is the opposite. I think you're much better at it than I am.
I think I tend to overlook them in terms of what I think about how it works in terms of the narrative as opposed to the actual execution of the performance. But so what's your final verdict?
Am I recommending this?
Would you recommend people to watch this?
No.
Would you recommend people to watch this for the holidays specifically?
No, not at any time would I recommend watching.
Ouch. All right. I'm going to say. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
This is the worst. This is the worst one we've done.
Wow, that is a bold. Well, Merry Christmas to everybody. That is a proclamation. I mean,
yeah.
Do you want to tell kids about the truth about Santa as well? I mean, how many?
What I'd say to kids is life is filled with disappointments.
All right. Dave gives us a lump of coal. I would still recommend watching it. I mean, I think it's, I think it's interesting one way or the other. Even if I don't think it's the most successful project, I think it's worth watching because it's different and interesting. Maybe not the most perfect movie in the world, and maybe annoyingly confusing, but it's not as terrible as what's the most terrible?
Is it better than the Star Wars Christmas special?
Well, that's really hard to answer because the Star Wars Christmas special lives in its own exclusive universe wherein it cannot really be judged fully. I mean, Life Day is an important event, Dave, and if you don't celebrate it, then I don't even know who you are anymore, frankly. I thought we were friends.
We are. Life Day is big.
Thank you. I'm glad that my faith in you has been restored for the holiday season.
Sure.
It should be noted that this is part of a series that Hulu is putting together called, I think, Into the Dark. And we were, for instance, talking about at one point about reviewing the Thanksgiving version of Into the Dark. They have they have like a Halloween version, they have a
Sure.
Thanksgiving version, and now they have their Christmas version. I'm really curious if they're going to do like a New Year's, and then a Valentine's Day, and then a St. Patrick's Day,
I
and
would
then Easter, and then Mother's Day. I mean, I don't know if they're going to keep going with the holidays, but it's a pretty interesting take if they do.
I would think that they would do at least Valentine's Day, right? I mean,
I
that's.
hope so. That'd be great. I want to see a Valentine's Day
Well, I
horror
mean,
movie.
Christmas wasn't so good.
What else have you been seeing since the last time we talked? Anything else? Anything interesting?
Oh yeah. I've seen some stuff.
Okay.
So I saw Overlord. Overlord.
How was Overlord?
Dude, so much fun.
Is it?
So, yeah, I mean, like, here's the deal. Like, I saw I probably watched the trailer like 100 times, just getting ready for this thing. Like, you've seen it, right?
The trailer or the movie?
The trailer.
I've seen the trailer. Yep.
Right, and it's so good, and that it's everything about the movie's great. The action, the pacing, the characters, the performances. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Would you can you compare it to anything else you've seen?
Oh,
Like what does it remind you of? Or
I mean, you know what? It reminds me more of a video game, like a Wolfenstein kind of.
That's exactly what I thought it might kind of be like based on the trailer. It looked very video game-ish, and of course, because it's about the occult and about Nazis, I'm like, yeah, Wolfenstein. You know, which I mean, that's not a criticism, by the way. I mean, I'm a fan of the franchise one way or the other, so you know.
Yeah, it's not so much the occult as it is just just mad scientist and just I mean, because it's the Nazis did horrible experiments on people, and it just kind of takes that and that scary premise and runs with it.
Is it more like sci-fi-ish from that point of view?
It's definitely, I'd say, sci-fi horror / more. It's equal parts of all three. I mean,
or it kind of seemed like Resident Evil, but like with Nazis.
Yeah, I'd go with that. There's just some really good scenes, like some really scary stuff when they finally get into the lab, and yeah.
I didn't really hear much about it, just in general, in terms of reaction. I don't know how well it did. I don't know what kind of critical reaction it had.
I think it was muted. Like I think it made like its budget and probably didn't even make the marketing money back. Which is this is something that I find that people just like to complain about movies in the sense that they're like, oh, there's so many comic book movies and everything's there's nothing original, and it's all just blockbusters. But then when a movie comes out with a mid-range budget, this is I think $38 million budget, not
really?
crazy.
That's it?
Yeah, right. It's not crazy.
Huh.
Nobody goes to see it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a flop or anything, but I don't think it made any money. Also, I saw The Void, because I know we've talked about that.
Yeah.
I saw that it was around Thanksgiving, so it's been a while. But I liked it. I liked it a lot, and I thought that, and I've read about it since. I thought that the end kind of begged a sequel.
It up? Yeah, I think so too. I think the end basically requires.
They're not doing it.
They're not going to do anything? No?
No.
Wow.
No, they're like, that's it. That's the story. That's how it ends. But I definitely, if it's still on Netflix, people should, check that out before it's gone.
I mean, maybe we'll do a full episode about it at some point if you want.
I would love to do that.
Plenty to dive into.
I saw The Boy on Netflix as well.
The Boy.
The Boy is it's got the actor, the woman from Walking Dead, and she's a caretaker for this.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, did you see the first one, or isn't there a sequel now?
Is there a sequel?
I thought there was a second
I
one.
only saw the first one. I don't think there's a sequel, but maybe I'm wrong.
For some reason, I feel like I read about it much recently. Let me just... I don't know.
Okay.
No, I guess you're right. I guess there was only just the one. Yeah.
Well, it's on Netflix too, so you can.
That's another thing that we might want to dive into at some point. But yeah, I definitely wanted to watch this. Yeah.
It's a little slow. I have to say though that the last 15 minutes or so, I liked it. So I'd say it's worth checking out as well.
Excellent.
And I went to the New York City Horror Film Festival.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. I was given tickets and for my birthday, and I went, and a friend and I went and saw we saw the shorts, and we saw it's called The Child Remains.
Child Remains.
And I think the guy said it was like his 42nd festival he'd shown it at.
Oh wow.
So it was cool. I mean, the director was cool. He answered a lot of questions.
I mean, that's always the best thing about going to Fest, right? Where you actually get to talk to the creators and see like the people behind it, and you hear the more information about the genesis of it. I mean, it's a creative project, and it's fun to talk to people that are involved in the creative process about this stuff. It all kind of comes together better.
Yeah, I'd say with The Child Remains, pacing is a little slow. I mean, it felt a little long, but the payoff. I mean, there's twists and they are neat, and the payoff's good. Like, yeah, I mean, I was very satisfied with the ending. So it's going to get a theatrical run, a limited run. He said, I think in the States. I think it's Canadian. It's a Canadian film.
Ah.
When it's available, I'm sure it'll be on, VOD and probably ultimately Netflix or Hulu or something like that.
Cool.
What about you? What you seen anything?
Love Actually, the Christmas rom-com from 2005. And I have to say, I was only introduced to the movie last year, and I kind of love it, unironically. So
Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not judging you.
You can judge all you want. It has a lot of problems in terms of the way that it portrays male-female hetero relationships. Every love story in the movie is basically based on a guy in some sort of position of power pursuing a woman that is sort of working under them or under him in a way. It's got some questionable things going on. There's some really, really questionable side plots. Have you ever seen it?
I have not seen it.
That's
but
okay. You're.
I feel like I know someone who may want to watch that.
It also is exactly what it sounds like. It really is a movie that's about an ensemble cast and a couple of sort of half-baked in a way plots about all these love relationships, and they're all very broad stroke. They're all a lot of cliched stuff, and it still works. I mean, it's still funny. It's still enjoyable. It's still upbeat. It's optimistic, and you come out feeling good. And it's also a Christmas movie, which is why I saw it recently. So,
okay,
the actual opposite, the literal end opposite of everything we talk about this show. There you go.
Yeah. No. Well, I'm glad you did that. I'm glad. This is a safe place. You can.
Thank you. I'm glad that you feel that way. Yeah. People should know that we're not just two-dimensional characters. We also have thoughts and feelings. I guess.
So I'm told. Yeah.
Maybe.
Right.
I don't know.
Sure.
It's hard to say. Yeah. All
right,
so
yeah.
Dave. Yeah.
Yeah. That's. I'm good. You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Merry Christmas to our viewers. Happy holidays to our viewers. All the etc. stuff. Happy New Year's to our viewers, because I'm sure we won't do this again before New Year's, probably.
Yeah. Happy New Year's.
Okay.
Happy Martin Luther King Day, President's Day.
Who knows? Yeah.
Valentine's Day. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay. Good luck. I think the one thing I really wanted was there was at one point I really wanted, I guess, a big wheel was one of the things I coveted the most, and I got it. It was a Dukes of Hazzard big wheel, and myself and my best friend at the time, were little terrors on it all over the neighborhood. I think we terrorized anything and everyone around us, and we destroyed a fair amount of property, I think, in the process. So it was good. Wasn't my grisly death. It was the grisly death of, like, bushes and other things around us.
Okay, well, how does that work in Vermont? I mean...
It was a neighborhood with sidewalks, but, like, also, you know, lots of little avenues to the forest and stuff around you, so...
Sidewalks. Because they don't have sidewalks in Vermont, right? I mean,
No, they took them all out. They're retrofitting Vermont at this point. It's all going to be wood and steam.
I like it.
Yeah, everybody's on board.